President Biden officially giving the green light to the Willow Project, a huge and hugely controversial oil drilling project in Alaska.
Hey, today is going to be a great topic. This is my first opportunity to go over with you a very big environmental case, and I'm super stoked to do this. It's a big project in the northern Alaska area, and we're talking about something 23 million acres. It's called the Willow Project, and what we have here is ConocoPhillips. They purchased all of these rights to extract oil and do oil drilling in this area. And there are these big environmental preservation groups that are looking to block it. And what we're going to go over today is a crazy fight between this big oil, all right? And then we have the environmentalists. Then we have the federal government that's trying to navigate this. And then we have the federal court, okay, which is, it is a federal government, the federal court, but it's a different entity, okay? And what I used to always tell clients is that a lot of times for building permits, and this is for like a simple building permit, for example, you have to convince the government, sometimes it's the county that issues the permit. Sometimes, it could be the federal government, it could be a city, whatever it is. And then if there is people protesting, then you have to convince the court that you properly got the permit from the government. And so that's what we have here. That's why they have to win through different entities of the federal government if this big oil is going to want to drill in Alaska. And now a little bit of kind of like the setup to this ginormous multi-billion-dollar fight. Well, first of all, I love World War II history. And did you know that in Alaska, there's two islands that in World War II, Japan took over and occupied two islands. The goal was that they were going to go from Alaska and into Canada and take over the continental United States. So they wanted to go from the Pacific Ocean and up, coming from the north. And on their way to take over the continental United States, they would just take over Canada while they're there. Kind of like when my wife says, can you get milk on your way home? It's like, can you just take Canada on your way to the United States? That didn't work out, right? But during World War II, they sent a lot of troops, both the Canadian Army and the American Army, into Alaska. And then they developed a lot of roads and did all these other things. And obviously realizing there's tons of gas there in the state of Alaska. Right. At one point I wanted to do a World War II podcast. What do you think? We'll do that one as well? Yeah, maybe. If I get enough interest, maybe I'll do that. I just love talking and I love World War II history. Okay, so now comes, in 1999, this big company, ConocoPhillips, they started purchasing leases from the federal government, allowing it to extract oil from this northern part of Alaska. And this particular part of Alaska, it's kind of very delicate because I'm going to do the history portion very quickly here. In the 20s, the federal government dedicated a lot of this lands as reserves. And it was about 23 million acres. And they handed control of it to the Navy for the kind of the benefit of kind of keeping it reserved for wildlife and land and for if that the Navy would just kind of control it. And if they have to build a Navy, obviously for national security purposes, they would do that if they had to, right? So anyway, and then in the 70s, the federal government decided to transfer the land from the Navy to the Secretary of the Interior. And then what that did is it opened up the possibility that the land could be developed, it could be sold, it could be, whatever, right? And that there was a thing, like a little caveat in there in the kind of the transfer and everything in the 70s and after that, the Secretary of the Interior would have the authority over the land and it'd be kind of managed by the Bureau of Land Management, which is BLM. Every time I hear BLM, I think of Black Lives Matter, right? But no, if I do say BLM, this is the Bureau of Land Management. It's a federal government entity. And it's kind of managing this land that's kind of, under the control of the Secretary of the Interior. And one of the things is that if it allows the land to be developed and, any like oil extracted or anything like that, it has to make sure that it's not harmful, dangerous to the environment. Okay. And so, here it's conditions, restrictions on developments to protect the environment. That's kind of the way it is written. And then now we have, after 1999, it took about 20 years for this project to finally get kind of like more steam going. And then ConocoPhillips then announced in 2018 that they are ready to rock and roll with this thing. And in these millions of acres, they want to drill for oil. There is at least 600 million barrels of oil there, which is a lot. At first, I mistakenly thought I read 600 million gallons, which is a lot, but then it was no, barrels. Every barrel is about 40 gallons or 50, depending on what kind of gasoline or whatever they're going to try to extract from it. So we're talking about billions of gallons of gas and oil and everything here. So, and then there's this other thing I said at least there's a lot more potential there, It's kind of like one person comes to the party and all of a sudden they're like, hey, I have a bunch of friends. and they all come into the party. That's how much oil there is there. And now we have these entities that are trying to stop this, Greenpeace and Defenders of Wildlife. Defenders of Wildlife is a nonprofit entity. And there's something I say all the time, which is nonprofit entities make a lot of money. All right. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. And I looked up their tax. The one thing about nonprofits, since they get all these breaks and all these tax breaks and all these other things, that they have to publicly disclose their tax records. And this entity that doesn't make a profit makes about $50 million a year in income. And their executives get about $3 million a year. And then the CEO gets about 500 grand a year. So there's good money in these nonprofits. So they are filing these federal cases to stop this from happening. And now what then happened is ConocoPhillips, every time they, when they want to get this permit to extract the oil, they had to do what's called an environmental impact statement. And this is where the environmental companies come in and say that this is a problem. All right. So when you extract oil, all right, it releases a lot of different gases into the atmosphere, like methane gas. And if there's even if there isn't a fire, just the fact that you're extracting it is going to cause gases to go up. Just imagine if I had like a big thing of gasoline and I poured it on the table, whoosh, right? There would be like all sorts of gases that are being emitted from that. So that's kind of what happens when they're extracting all of this oil from the ground. And then there's also when they're taking out oil, there's always an oil spill, like oil spills when you're taking it out. And the state of Alaska is particularly sensitive to oil spills. Before your time. All right, Mateo, big oil spill in Alaska. Anyway, so there's going to be all these oil spills. And, and what it does is as they're drilling, even the drilling, it's so hard that it's kind of causing like a mini earthquake all the time in that little region. And then it also disrupts a lot of the kind of the ecosystems and, all the habitat and everything around it, like all of it is disrupted. And the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions and the methane and all this other jazz, all of that increases the, all of this talk and all these issues about the climate change, right? Because it's releasing all this gas into the air. And very, very importantly, President Biden, one of his very big campaign promises, right, was I'm going to protect the environment and I'm not going to let, this big oil drilling things happen. And sure enough, he signed it, okaying this. He signed an executive order that stated by the year 2030, we will reduce our emissions by 50% of what the levels were in 2005. And then by 2050, we will have zero net emissions. And this project, if it's approved, it's going to take about 30 years to get all that oil out. All right. So if you add 30 years plus the year 2023, we are beyond the year 2050, right? But the word net emissions, there was some lawyer or some little snake that came up with that idea. It doesn't mean we're not going to have any emissions. It just means we're going to have a zero net effect. So that, for example, if we have something, some sort of, something going on in Alaska, we will buy somewhere in the Amazon jungle something, or somewhere else in America will stop generating fuel or generating emissions, and then the overall effect would be net of zero. Do you see what I'm saying? So anyway, so he signed that. So there's obviously a lot of criticism there. Anyway, so that one plays in a little bit, but not in terms of the legal. That's just the political. He has a lot of pressure to get this done, right? Because there's big oil and big money involved and big jobs and blah, blah, blah. As a lawyer, let me focus on the legal. Then, so this happened in 2018. Then the environmental impact report was, environmental impact statement was submitted, this and that. And the federal government okayed the deal. In 2020, then they were going to just start drilling, like start building the roads and doing all this great stuff. And just to be specific, it was going to be about 26 miles of paved roads and 100 miles plus of non-paved roads in this area. And then these big, huge drilling stations. They have to build an airport there. I mean, it is a like a massive undertaking to get these hundreds of millions of barrels. In 2020, these environmental companies filed a lawsuit, and first order of business, jurisdiction. All right. They filed the lawsuit in a federal court in Alaska. And the reason why the federal court has jurisdiction, this was called subject matter jurisdiction, is there are these federal laws, the Endangered Species Act and the National Environmental Protection Agency Act and a few other ones. So those are what's called federal questions, meaning like it's a federal issue. So that is how they have subject matter jurisdiction. And this is all happening in Alaska. So they could file, they have what's called personal jurisdiction in that area because they're filing it in Alaska. So that's how they have jurisdiction in Alaska. Now, why do they want to do this in Alaska? See, because this is going to benefit the whole country, right? And the whole country is going to, get more oil and then definitely this corporation that's headquartered in Texas, they're going to make a lot of money. ConocoPhillips, it's not even their own money that's doing a lot of this. They have money from outside sources. And this company has all the money in the world. I mean, they have deals with Ecuador and Venezuela and Kazakhstan where they have a lot of oil extracting contracts there, and then they also have the Oregon Employees Pension Fund that is kind of investing in this Willow project. So this company just has money from everywhere going into this. But it's going to benefit the whole country, but it's not going to necessarily benefit Alaska. Do you see what I mean? So it's very important to consider what's going on here. They filed this lawsuit in 2020 in Alaska. There's going to be judges who are, from Alaska and they live in Alaska and they really like Alaska and they're federal judges, right? And those are going to be the judges that are going to decide this. And that is going to be a big hometown, advantage, right? The federal government, President Biden and actually this was officially green lighted by President Trump. And then President Biden kept the green light going, right? So anyway, the federal government is not Alaska, right? It's the federal government. but the Alaskan judges are Alaska. And they then have this jurisdiction in Alaska. So in 2020, they made this argument that's basically, look, this is going to destroy the natural habitat in this area, and it's going to endanger polar bears, brown bears, seals, muskoxen, is it caribou? Caribou? Yeah, caribou, the moose, and all these different birds, hawks, falcons, eagles. It's like the whole National Football League there, right? So all of them are going to be endangered after this happens. And they have also these very, very nice rivers that I cannot pronounce the name, the Kokoskorko River and the Kioskorkia River. I can't pronounce those rivers. They kind of call them the Collaville river areas, okay? And there they have different salmon and different type of fish and all of that. Did you know? The word of the day, it's actually they have different fishes, all right? Fishes. Now, you know the plural of fish is fish. However, one time I said fishes. I think my wife made fun of me. And then I said, no, fishes is a word. And what it is means if you have a lot of the same, like fish of the same, a lot of salmon or a lot of goldfish, and you want to talk about them in a plural, it's fish. But if you're talking about a lot of different species of fish, like salmon and goldfish and, trout and whatever else, then you have to say fishes. All right. So anyway, all right. So that is a word, dang it. Anyway, so there is a lot of different fishes in these rivers. So I go over all of this because what they said, that lawsuit in 2020 to the federal court said that when the federal government okayed this project, they didn't properly consider all of these factors. Then they said they also didn't particularly consider these climate crisis problems like the carbon dioxide emissions and how all of these oil spills are going to affect that area and how the constant drilling will affect the area. And then finally, there's some native lands in that area that are going to be affected by this. So all of that. Now, it's kind of, how do I put this? Imagine anyone here want to go into environmental law, right? And kind of protecting the environment. Imagine the work that had to go into this, because for all of this, for that kind of challenge that they're making to the federal court, they spent millions of dollars doing it because they had to hire all sorts of different scientists, right? And those scientists would kind of explain the ecosystems and explain how it's going to be affected and everything. And those scientists are going to go over all of that. So a lot of these environmental laws is that they're, kind of a way that they're going to convince the judge, right, the federal judge in Alaska, that this was done so improperly and wasn't considered the correct way, right? And then they also, had to have, in terms of the environmental or the different animals and the different, it was just all sorts of, I read all the reports and everything. And I said I couldn't properly get into that in this podcast because then we'd be here until Monday, right? Which I wish I could do, right? But I couldn't get, but anyway, just take my word for it. It cost millions of dollars and it took a couple years for them to properly put that together. And I was very impressed. And who else was very impressed was the federal court in Alaska, because what they did is they stopped this whole project. All right. Yeah, the environmentalists won. Okay. They actually got the federal government to stop Big Oil and the federal government from doing this. Then Big Oil filed an appeal. Then the appeal goes to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. Now, that one is not in Alaska. That is in California. And what happened is then they had, the appellate court look all of this over. And it's a balancing test. So it's not like a clear cut kind of thing. It's in a way, it's okay to endanger animals. I mean, every building kills animals, right? Everything. So it's okay to do that. It's all about the kind of the balancing test, so to speak, right? And the Ninth Circuit was also so impressed by this. And they also had these alternatives, like kind of like different ways that they could extract some oil that will take a few years longer, but it's a much lower impact. That they said, well, look, the federal government didn't consider any alternatives, properly. The ConocoPhillips didn't consider alternatives properly, and all of this should be, stopped. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal agreed that it should be stopped. So then that's it. They won. And there wasn't going to be an appeal to the Supreme Court because they were just, the environmental groups did such a good job showing all of this was done poorly and it's going to impact the environment really, in a kind of unbalanced way type of thing. And so they won the case. Okay, get this. So I remember vividly, there was this case I had where a guy had a restaurant and there was like a dispute with the landlord, and the way the landlord filed the lawsuit was improper. And because he filed it in an improper way, there wasn't proper jurisdiction. And so Joe Sammo came to the rescue, right? And it took almost a year, maybe a little less. But anyway, we won and we got the case dismissed because it was improper jurisdiction. So we freaking celebrated, right? And then he's like, man, I'm so glad this is all over. And I said, yes, we won. Then he's like, all right, cool. So I never have to deal with this again. I go, no, they're going to sue you again next week or so. He said, what? I said, what? And he said, what? Yeah. What happened is they were just allowed to sue him again. They just had to reword it and kind of sue him in the right jurisdiction. Okay. So in this case, the same thing happened. After all of this was said and done, and after they won the case, very shortly thereafter, guess what happened? The ConocoPhillips developed a new plan to get the agreement. And the new plan was a little bit, or it was less intrusive on the environment, so to speak, kind of, okay, we don't need as many roads. We could drill, these different times, and we could take a break in this summer month because the summer more oil burns, and when it's warmer. So we can maybe try to do a little bit less in the summer. We can, whatever. We'll give the Eskimos, whatever. I don't know. I'm just making that up. Anyway, so we will do all these different things, right? And they then sent that to the federal government, and this time they had some alternatives. But as the environmental companies say, the alternatives weren't that much better, And so they submitted all of that to the federal government. Sure enough, the federal government ultimately approved it. That's when I said the Biden, green lighted it. Is it green light, or green lighted it? What would you say? The first one? All of them are correct? Lawyers do not like hearing all of them are correct. No, right? I'm going to say he green lighted the project, okay? So then President Biden green lighted the project, and now it's going forward, okay? Until this new lawsuit was filed. Because remember what I said, they won the lawsuit, then there was a new lawsuit filed, okay? So now comes this new lawsuit that was filed in March 2023. The new lawsuit states a lot of the same things as the old lawsuit states. It doesn't have as much about the native populations because they, there isn't that, they kind of like changed the plans around so it didn't affect them as much type of thing. But according to the Greenpeace and the Defenders of Wildlife, the current plan and how they're going to take out. Now, remember, this project going on since 1999, all right, when they first started like acquiring the rights to do this, it's gonna make billions and billions of dollars. Like, I don't know, maybe like $40 billion or something, just something crazy like that. And anyway, so they're gonna keep fighting this forever, and so is the other side. So now in this current lawsuit, we have kind of some of the same things, and what they're saying, they hired all of these scientists again. And the way they stated it in this lawsuit, once again, okay, how this company wants to extract this oil. It's going to, again, affect all these species. It's going to damage this wildlife. It's going to change the lake system here. It's going to like forever ruin this area. All right. The company made changes and they hired their own scientists, right? And their own scientists said, no, if it's extracted a certain way, it won't emit as much, gas into the environment as you're anticipating. It's also not going to cause as much disruption as you're saying. So they have their own set of scientists, right? And yes, there are scientists and companies that want to develop, dang it. There's a lot of money in development, by the way, right? So they're getting paid big bucks to kind of publish these reports saying, no, the freaking polar bears are going to be just fine, Joe Samo. There's not going to be any polar bears. And they go, whoa, 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 how did that happen? I'm going to do a little thing where we have a polar bear running over me. What do you say? Can we do that? All right, go. All right. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. So that's their position, the companies, right? And I then read, some of their reports in terms of this lawsuit. The Joe Samo prediction is that this is going to go forward, all right, one way or another. I think this is what will happen, right? Here's what's going to happen. The environmentalists did a great job winning that first lawsuit. I think that they'll probably win in the Alaska court. I think they probably won't win when it goes to the Ninth Circuit. I think they'll, ultimately lose. But before that happens, I think the company will probably get some sort of agreement with them. And that agreement will include things, that the environmentalists said in their kind of alternative plans. Like if this has to happen, we'll limit it to these areas. We'll limit it to drilling during these seasons. We'll make sure there's like a few, like I said before, these rivers that are they have like particular type of species. You have to build any roads you build and whatnot, like has to go around those. You see what I'm saying? So there is eventually going to be a plan that they agree to. Darn it. I think that's going to happen. I just think there's going to be there's just too much money that is going to be made from this, for better or worse. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen, right? And so sooner or later, let's see, it's right now we are in May 2023, and I think by May 2025, the drilling will happen. All right, that's going to be my prediction. If you want to invest in this project, call. No, just talking. But it is going to happen. I do not think they're going to block this longer than that. But the good news is that they will force all of these alternatives to happen. So they'll at least mitigate the damages to the environment.